Hello all, welcome to end the session. So in this session, let's see what are the things that we're going to learn. Let's have a small recap of what are the things that we have learned in the previous session. So if you can clearly observe in the previous session, we have seen the complete loop of basic operators, what is meant by precedence, what is the comma operator. And we have also seen this modify in place thing, what is meant by increment and increment, postfix and prefix, increment and decrements. All things we have seen in the previous session altogether. So in this session, let's focus on three important core points of JavaScript, which are known as comparison operators. Let's try to understand how does comparison actually happens between different data types. And also let's try to understand what is meant by conditional branching, and also we'll try to understand what is meant by logical operators altogether. So with these three things, we'll end up this given particular session. So let's go ahead without any kind of delay. So for that, let me open my VS Code. So let me create a new file known as comparisons. I think the first thing that I wish you could go with is comparison operators. So let's go with comparison. Okay. Let me rename comparison dot chase. So I'll write the code in this given particular thing. Let me clear my terminal. Now, fine. Now, yes, actually, we know in mathematics we have different operators to compare. For example, the greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, if equals to. We have all of these respect to comparative operators not equal to. So for comparison in math, comparisons in math, we have something like greater than, less than. We have something like greater than or equal to. We have something like less than or equal to. We have something like equals to. We have something like not equals to. Like not equals to, we write is equal to and we'll cross it off. That is meant by not equal to. So the same kind of a mathematical operators can also be utilized in the JavaScript altogether. So let's go ahead and let's see in this respective thing how does this entire comparisons actually work. So on a simpler note, I can say comparisons often um, returns, or I can say all comparison operators return result in, sorry, in boolean output, in booleans. For example, if I have this comparison known as 1 greater than 2, the output is actually false, because we already know by mathematical standards 1 cannot be greater than 2. So in programming specifically, whenever we use this comparison operators like this, we end up result like this, because all comparison operators that we are seeing in the here in the first line, all these comparison operators will return the result in the format of boolean. This is the thing. So if I have this thing known as in 3 greater than sorry 3 greater than 2, as we already know, this is actually true. So any given particular comparative operator that you use, for example, if I instead of this I use this 1 less than 2, I can use it. Yeah. So 1 greater than 2 will yield the value of boolean false, and 1 less than 2 will yield the value of true, because we already know by basic math standard 1 is always less than 2. So this is how the comparison operators will actually work like. So for example, you can try it out for examples. I can say console.log 1 greater than 2. Similarly, console.log 1 less than 2. Let's use this both of the things. I'll say node, let's run the code. Run the code in this given thing, comparison dot chase. So you can clearly observe the output for this first console log is 1 greater than 2 is false, and the output for the second console log, which is 1 less than 2, is actually equal to the value of true. This is how this comparison operator actually work like. Now, this is how we already learned about this comparison in math, but we have interesting thing known as string comparisons. What is meant by string comparisons altogether? How do we compare this given particular thing? For example, let me say console.log z greater than a. Z greater than a. So let me comment these things. Now, whenever we are trying to use this comparison operators with the respect of strings, we need to understand this one simple rule. String comparisons follow dictionary. I think dictionary. Or I can say the same thing as lexicographical. Lexicographical orders altogether. So because whenever we are dealing with this respect to lexicographical order, where the comparison actually happens between the format of strings to string, that's what this entire thing would be. So to be more precise, or I can say in other words, I can say strings are compared letter by letter, letter by letter. So that's how the strings would be compared. Yeah. Now let's go ahead and understand how this entire thing actually works. So let me do this one thing. So in this case, what would be the output? Let's check it out. First, let's try to understand what exactly will be the output for this respective code, and we can then decide why the output is in such a way. I can clearly see if it is giving is in the format of true. As if you can clearly observe, A is the first letter and Z is the last letter. A is the first letter and Z is the last letter. So that's how this entire thing, because for example, in the same case, one is the first letter and two is the second sorry, one is the first character and two is the second number altogether. So always two greater than one. The same kind of logic can be applied here, because here we follow in a dictionary format altogether, where strings are compared letter to letter. To create more easier example, let me take this console.log. If I say glow greater than something like glee. Now here the comparison actually happens in this format. First, the first letter in the first word and the first letter in the second word will be compared with each other. G, capital G and capital E. As I added, it is very important. This entire thing is in a case sensitive format, because as I have already mentioned, JavaScript is a case sensitive language. So whenever we have this capital G and capital E in the first letter, both are equal letters. So nothing is messed up. Coming back to the second letter, now the comparison goes with second letter in both the words. So the second letter in the both the words is L. You can clearly observe in glow, second letter is L, and in glee, the second letter is L. So when both compared, both are at the same state. So comparison will be cancelled. Now coming back to the third word in the both words, sorry, third character or third letter in the both words. In the first word, glow, the third character is O. In the second word, the third character is E. So O greater than E. According to the dictionary order, initially we'll find the letter E, but later on as we go to different letters, we'll find O. So this given particular thing will yield the value of true. Let me run the code. So this code, after comparing third letter, this is like O greater than E. Let me write it in this string format so you can easily understand it. O greater than E. O greater than E. So this yields the value of true. Let's run the code and let's see. Yeah, that's the value of true. That's the value true. So when you have some complex words, the comparison actually happens between letters, each individual letter at a given point of time. Similarly, let's try out a simple example. Let it be something like B greater than something like B. The same thing. First letters of two words will be compared. So here it is the same value. It is B. In the first letter, it is B. In the second letter, it is B. Coming back to the next comparison of second letters in both the words. It is the same, right? It is the same. Now, one important thing we need to understand here is after comparing third letter, comparing third letter, it would be in this format. Initially, it is E and it is of empty, because you can clearly see in the second word there are only two letters. So it would be something like null, something like null. So in this given particular case, we'll still see the value of true, because E is greater than some other thing. E is greater than something nothing, or E is greater than nothing. So you still see the value as true. You still see the value as true for these three comparisons, for this respect to three comparisons. So if you want me to explain this entire algorithm on how does these two strings will be compared, it is very simple. Compare the first character of both strings. This is the first step. First step is compare both characters, first character of both strings. Compare first characters of both strings. Second thing is, if the first character from the first string is greater than or less than the other string, then the string or the first string is greater or less. So instead, I have written this basic thing. Let me write it like this, or it is very pretty straightforward. I'll say, let me, sorry. First would be compare the first character of both strings. Second one, if the first character from the first string is greater or less than the other strings, then the first string is greater or sorry greater or less than the second one. So we are done. Now comes to this point. Otherwise, if both strings first character are same, compare the second characters the same way. Both one would be repeat until the end of string, right? Repeat entire length. So in this first example, we have two individual letters z greater than this, right? So as in a term, we are actually going ahead with this basic algorithm that implemented in JavaScript, like string comparison. But the actual truth is, um, this comparison algorithm that I have mentioned here is roughly equivalent to this one of the used in dictionaries or in phone mobiles also altogether. So for instance, in the same case, um, let's say here here let me take this simple example, console dot log capital A greater than small a. Now what would be the result? Because as I mentioned, JavaScript is a case sensitive language altogether. So when you try to do this kind of a thing, this yields the value of false. You might be saying, see, here we are going with the dictionary order. What is the difference between capital A and small a? It is nothing but the uppercase and lowercase. It's not with the difference of the letter itself. So why does we get the result as false? So to be more precise, instead of this entire string comparisons, it follows dictionary or lexicographical order that's partly or partially truth, but this follows unique coded values. Unique coded values. Let me show you what is meant by unique coded values. Let me get this thing. Let me get this table. Let me things like Unicode table, right? So list of Unicode symbols. Unicode chat. I think this is English Unicode table to be more precise. Mhm. What is this? Sorry. Let me show this table. If you can clearly observe this entire table, where is this entire table? This one single table, each of the respective character has a number. For example, you will see capital A number is 65. Capital A number is 65. But small a number is 97. So whenever you're doing this basic string comparison like this, here this entire thing is nothing but 65 greater than 97. 65 greater than 97. In general, this algorithm will be implemented, but in some cases or in most majority of the cases, underlying, see, the algorithm works in this pattern, but underlying the knowledge of or the core crux of this algorithm, the unicoded values will be appearing. The unicoded values will be appearing like this. You can simply search for Unicode English values. You will get all of these respective details, right? So that's why here, whenever we compared capital A with small a, here unicoded values will be included. So that's why we have this result as false, because 65 cannot be greater than 97. If it is of reverse, capital A greater than small a, then here the value would be something like true, because it is like this: 97 greater than 65. 97 greater than 65. If I rewrite it, I'll see the value as true, because 97 greater than 65. So it is how this entire I can say, wait, this is how entirely this entire string comparisons actually work. Now let's go do one thing. Yeah, now let's go back and understand the comparisons between different types, different data types. So I'll say comparisons between different types. So let's say if I say console.log, if I say 2 something like greater than 1. Now let's run the code. Not comparison, it yields the value of true. Why? Because this string, will be converted into a number. So this would be 2 greater than, so 2 greater than 1. Obviously 2 greater than 1, that's why we'll get the result as this thing. If I say 0 1, so in this case it would be 1 greater than 1, so it would be a false. So when are you using this comparison operators, when are you have string and a number, if the string consists of all different numbers or only different numbers, only all the values of numbers, that's what I meant, then sorry, give me a minute. Okay, fine, give me a minute. Sorry. Yes, fine. Yeah. So in this respective case, let's see what would be the result. So, right. Now you'll see it is mentioned as false. It is clearly mentioned as false. Because, wait a minute. Yeah, it is mentioned as false because 1 cannot be greater than 1. If I want to have this thing, I can say double equal to. I can say double equal to. So we have this operator known as double equal to. It's not a single equal to, double equal to. Sorry. So we have this operator known as double equal to, where this double equal to gives us the chance to explore whether both the sides is the value equal to or not. I mean, is the left hand side equal to right hand side? If you want to check that thing, we have this thing known as an equality symbol, which is represented as double equal to. So here on the left hand side, we have string formatted 1, and on the right hand side, we have a number. Even though this comparison operators will convert the string into a number, so this conversion will be true, or this part would be true. This part would be true. Similarly, we can say console.log 2 not equals to 3. This is true. Sorry. This is true because as we can clearly observe, the symbol that we are going to use for not equal to is exclamatory mark with an equal to. Exclamatory mark with an equal to. So because 2 cannot be 3, through 2 is not always equal to the 3. So if I run the code, you'll see it is true. I have 2 console logs. Let me see. Yeah. For the first console log, 1 is actually equal to the value of 1. In the second console log, we have 2 not equal to 3, which are both statements are actually equal to the value of true. That's why we get the respective result as true. Similarly, you can use this thing as true. We can use this thing as Boolean. Because whenever you have Boolean with a comparison operators, this will be converted to numbers. So if I convert Boolean true to number or true to number, it would be 1. So 1 equals to 1. That exactly is actually equal to the value of 2. So let me comment this thing. So I'll say, yeah. You can see the console log where I'm trying to compare Boolean true with the number 1. Even this Boolean true, if converted to number, as we have seen in the previous session, it would be equal to the value of 1. So 1 equal to 1. By the end of that, it is nothing but 1 equal to 1. Yeah, it is completely true. That's why we get the result as true. That's why we get the result as true. But there is a bit funnier sequence. Let me take this thing. It is, let me write a multiple line comment. It is possible that at the same time we can have the possibilities like two values are equal and one of them one of them is true as boolean and other one is false as boolean. For example, let's take this simple thing. It's a funny consequence. It's an interview question altogether. So I'll say let a is equal to something like 0. I'll say something like console.log. If I convert this thing of a, the number a to boolean, we know what is the result. It is false. Great. Similarly, let b is equal to something like 0 in the string format and do the same thing. Console.log boolean of, but here, sorry, here the value is true, because in a string, if you have something, if I convert the same thing to the value of boolean, it will be value of true. Now the thing is, if I say console.log a double equals to b, a double equals to b, then in this case, let's run the code. You'll see the magic. Oh, let me. What are the things? Right. The first console log is false. The second console log is true, but the third console log value is again true. This console log value is true. But see, one thing I have did is here two values similarly, the 0 and this string formatted 0. But only focus on the values. Do not focus on data types. Here both the values are 0. Only focus on the values, not the data types. Yes, A is storing number, B is storing string, but the values that they are storing, if you just take out the data type, you see the concrete value they are storing is 0. So two values are equal. One of them is true as a boolean. You can clearly see this one, this example where as a boolean this is actually true and another one is actually false. And another one is actually false. But when we compare both of them, you'll see the value is true. You'll see the value as true. So here when you're comparing this thing, you can clearly see as a values both are same. A is storing 0, B is storing 0, but in a string data type. So whenever you use double equal to, one very important thing we need to remember is when you are using double equal to, on both left hand side and right hand side, it only considers value. If using double equal to, it checks if both LHS and RHS values are equal. Only values. Only values. I repeat, only values equal or not. So in this respect to case, in the above case, it would be 0 double equals to string 0. So double equal to doesn't worry about data types. Double equal to doesn't worry about data types. So even though equality check double equal to is helpful for us for checking whether the left and right hand sides are both equal or not. So it doesn't worry about data types. But one very important thing is it should worry about data types. But the case here we are seeing is double equal to will only be focusing on values. Okay, left hand side is 0, right hand side is 0. It doesn't worry about the data types. It should not be the case all the ways. So we have a new thing known as strict equality. Strict, STRICT, strict equality. So what is meant by this strict equality altogether? So whenever we have this respect to thing known as strict equality, where it is known as triple equal to. Now whenever I do the same thing, if I do the same, for example, if I do the same thing, I'll say A triple equal to B. Then in this case, you will see the value as false. You'll see the value as false. If you want, let's try to comment unnecessary consoles. So A is 0, B is something like string formatted 0. Now you can clearly observe this console log. Whenever we do this respect to console log, if with the double equal to and with the triple equal to, you'll see the difference. Yeah. Now you can clearly see for the double equal to, as both the left hand and right hand side values are equal, that's why you got the value of true. But on the right hand side, when we have strict equality, here you can clearly see this strict equality not only checks the values on LHS and RHS, but it will also check data type. Check data type on both sides. So on the left hand side, on the right hand side, on the both sides, it will check the data type. Here, Why it is the reason of false? It's very straightforward. Number triple equal to, what is it? String. Here values are same, but left hand side data type is number, right hand side data type is string. So that's why we have false. That is what meant by this respect to thing known as in strict equality. So strict equality would be implemented like this. And another funniest, I can say another funniest thing would be this. It would be whenever we have something like, sorry, uh, comparison between null and undefined. Whenever we have this thing, let's say if I say console.log null equals to undefined, what would be the value? I mean, when I'm using this thing, let's use strict equality. Let's use strict equality. As when you are using strict equality, the strict equality will check both LHS and RHS values as data types of these things. As both the data types are different, null is a different data type and undefined is a different data type. So it would be it will be yielding the value of false. But let's have this console log with normal equality. If I say null double equals to undefined, then in this case we have the value as true. Even if you want, I'll run it. Like you can see, when we have strict equality between null and undefined, strict equality checks with the data type. So null and undefined are different data types. So we have the value of false. But the interesting fact is, whenever we compare null and undefined with normal equality, the double equal to, we have the value as actually equal to the value of true. Why this reason? Because null is a different value, undefined is a different value. Because double equality will check for the value, which doesn't care about data type. But in this given particular case, null and undefined, where null is a different value, undefined is a different value altogether, right? So in this aspect, when both the values are different, but still this double equal to is giving the value of true. Why such case? There is this given particular, there is a special rule named as, I think there is this sweet couple. Sweet couple. Because null and undefined are sweet couple. So under a sense, they both are actually equal. They both are actually equal to each other. Equal to each other, but they are not same values. Let me mention it like this. They equal each other in the sense of double equal to, but not any other value. Not any other value. So to be more precise, for comparison operators, for comparison operators, I can say null or undefined, null or undefined are converted to numbers. Like null will be converted to something like 0, null to 0, and undefined to something like nan. Even this is once very important thing for interview purposes. And also we have this separate thing which is known as comparison with zeros. Let me write it. Comparison with zeros and null. For example, if I say console.log null greater than 0, if I say console.log null less than 0, or I can say null equals to 0, console.log null greater than or equal to 0. In these all three respective cases, null greater than 0 is false, because 0, whenever we are using comparative operators, null will be converted to 0. 0 cannot be greater than 0, that's why it's false. Now on the other hand, we have null double equals to 0, where we have this thing, but it is false. It is false. This is false. Because you might be asking, sir, whenever we are having comparison operators with null, null will be converted to 0. So 0 double equals to 0 should be true, but it is false. There is a strange rule. It's a strange result, but I'll explain it. Whenever we have this thing known as null greater than or equal to 0, this value yields to the value of true. If you can clearly observe, mathematically, these results might be strange or shocking altogether. So this last result, this tells us this null is greater than or equal to 0, which is actually true. So in one of the comparisons, in one of the above comparisons, it must be true, but both are false. We can clearly observe here greater than 0 is false, equals to is false. But whenever it is greater than or equal to, it is true. If greater than or equal to greater than or equal to 0 is true, then either of these things, either of the top two comparisons should be true. Should be true. Give me one thing. Yeah, it should be true. Why is this kind of a strange behavior? The reason is, let me mention this. The reason is the equality check, which is nothing but double equal to, and comparison operators like greater than or equal to, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, all of these things work differently. This is a fundamental thing I want to mention. This is the fundamental thing I want to mention. So comparisons convert null to number, like treating it as zero. Treating it as zero. That's why you can clearly see greater than or equal to is something like this. Is true. 0 greater than or equal to is 0. And null greater than 0 is false, because 0 cannot be greater than 0. But 0 can be greater than or equal to 0. This is a subtle difference. This is a subtle difference. On the other hand, when we have used this, we write it, um, the equality check for undefined and null is is defined such that without any conversions, without any conversions, without any conversions, they equal each other. They equal each other and don't equal with any other. Any other. So this is why we get null double equals to 0 is false. Because as I have already mentioned, this given particular thing, I was in sweet couple. They are equal to each other. That's why whenever I have null double equals to undefined, it is true. But null double is equal to 0, it is not true. It is false. Because here we are doing equality check, not comparison. Not doing any kind of a comparisons, greater than or less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. We are not doing that kind of thing. We're simply checking the values. So that's why I've mentioned it as equality thing. Right. Now coming back to this respective thing, give me a minute. Right. Now coming back to this thing, let me comment all of these things. I'm mentioning the reasons. Like these are the things that I have learned for more than 4 years. In not 4 years, more than 6 years. By observations I've made this kind of an important observation that need to be mentioned. That's why I'm noting down all of it. Now let's try to have this thing known as um and I can say incomparable undefined. So what if I say console.log? Oh my god. Console.log. It would be something like if I have undefined greater than 0, you'll see false, because we cannot compare undefined with any other thing. That's simple standard. Undefined cannot be compared with any other values. If it's something, because these are interview in an interview format, it would be very confusing. Less than 0, it's false. Compare with any other thing except null. Undefined behaves like this. Undefined equal to equals to 0. It is always still false. Still false. Because as we have seen, all these results are false. Let's try to understand why it is false. Because all the things are actually false. Let's see why the result is false. So if you can clearly observe the comparison operators that we are using, greater than or less than, where they convert, like comparisons convert undefined to nan. Undefined to nan. And nan is a special numeric number, not a number, which always returns false when compared. Which always returns false when compared. But coming back to this given particular equality thing, as we have seen, uh, The equality check returns false because undefined equals only to null. That's why I've told you that's a sweet couple. And undefined will be only equal to undefined. It cannot be equal to any other value. That's why you'll see false values. That's why you'll see values. That's why when you are dealing with undefined and null, when you're comparing using comparative operators, please be very careful. It's super important. Now coming back to this next thing, which is known as conditionals. Conditional branching. So I'll say conditionals. Yes, conditionals. We're done with this comparison till this given particular point. Let's go ahead and let's see conditionals altogether. What is meant by conditionals? I'll say sometimes we need to perform different actions based on different conditions. Based on different conditions. That's what we actually need to do. Then we may use a if statement. Like if this happens, I'll do that. If that happens, I'll do this. Right? So we may use if statement or a new operator known as conditional operator. Conditional operator. Operator. So the conditional operator symbol is question mark. We can use if statement specifically, or we can use conditional operator, which is known as the question mark. How do we use it? For example, I'll say let a is equal to something known as 1, or let a is known as 1024. And if I'll say if, and I'll write a condition that if a is greater than 0, if a is greater than 0, then I'll print console.log. I'll say yes, a is a is positive number. A is a positive number. You can write multiple lines of code. You can write multiple lines. If I say another console log, I can say by. So in this syntax, if you can clearly observe, if this above condition is true, this above condition is true, then only I'll execute the code inside these braces. So this is the syntax of if condition, which is nothing but we'll write if statement and we mention some condition like this. If this condition is true, then only I'll execute this code. Otherwise, I don't execute code. So if I say console.log outside the if statement. So for example, here in this given particular case, a is greater than, a is a variable that is storing greater than value of 0. So this condition will be worked. This condition will work. And if this condition is true, the code that is present inside this thing, inside this flower braces will be executed. So let's check whether this happens or not. Node conditionals.js. I can clearly observe. These two statements are being executed. The code that is present inside this flower brackets is executed. That's why I can clearly see here. S, A is a positive number by, and after this execution of this code that is present in the flower brackets, code outside of this given particular flower brackets will also be executed. That's why you can clearly see outside if statement. Outside the if statement is also printed on the console. Right? Now the interesting thing is if I make this thing A as a minus, if I make this A as negative thing, it is minus 1024. Then in this case, A greater than 0, this condition will fail. Once if this condition fails, this entire flower brackets code will not be executed. It will be left out. It will be left out. It will be left out. This internal flower brackets code will not be executed. Only the code that is outside this flower brackets, will be executed. So let's check it out. And run the code. I can clearly see the output that we are seeing is outside the if statement, because here the condition is failing. If the condition is failing, if statement or this entire code will not be executed. Or to be more precise, the code that is present inside the flower braces will not be executed. So this will be skipped because the condition is failed. This will be skipped by the JavaScript interpreter, and whatever remaining code that is present will be executed. This is how this if statement actually work. And one other important thing we need to understand is whenever we are using this if statement, inside this, which I am telling it as a condition, which is actually known as an expression, this result will be converted to Boolean. This result will be converted to Boolean. So a greater than 0, in this given particular case, this entire above code will be looking like this. If a greater than 0, which is nothing but false. If a else, false. False. So false. If as this given particular condition itself is false, then we don't execute it. But if I make this a as positive number, then in this case, a greater than 0 will be actually equal to the value of true. True values. So similarly, in some cases, people will write code like this. If of 0 and they'll write code like this. If of 0 and will code. So even though if you mention 0, this if statement, let me write it. If I write 0, I'll say console.log. Will this be executed? So whatever thing that you write inside this braces will be converted to booleans. If I convert 0 to boolean, it is false. So this will not be executed. This will not at all be executed. If I something write like this, false, this will not be executed. This internal code, the code that is present inside the braces, will not be executed. So it is very important when you're writing the condition, it should be super clear. It should be super clear. Right. Right. Now, one very important thing is, okay, if this condition is failing, I'm completely avoiding this internal part and I'm going to outside the code and I'm executing this remaining lines. But we have this statement known as else, where we can write it as like this. If this condition is failing, instead of executing outside code, I will execute some other thing. I'll say console log. I'll simply mention condition failed. So if else, if this condition fails, then automatically this internal code will not be executed. So if condition fails, I want to execute else code. This is what this respective code actually means. So if this works, I'll go this direction. If that works, I'll go that direction. So if this given particular condition works, I'll go this direction. Else I'll go to other direction. That's what this given particular else statement means. That's what we can have this given particular else statement means. And one very important thing, whenever you're writing if statement, this condition is mandatory. But whenever you're writing else, it is simple statement. And another important thing is, you can have only if statement without else statement. This works. Which is nothing but if I remove else, the code still works fine. Even if I can run the code, you'll see the code. The a is positive number, so this code will be executed and the remaining code will be executed. But the thing is, without if statement, without if statement, we cannot have else statement. For example, if I remove this entire upper code, now else by default on its own cannot be executed. This is the one fundamental thing I want to explain it. Now, the thing is, as you can clearly see, we give condition for if statement. We don't give condition for else statement. But what if we have a case where we want to definitely mention different use cases, different cases altogether, or different conditions, multiple conditions? In such a case, where I can say we have this thing known as an else if. Let me write it. So when I am writing else if, I can have multiple conditions. I'll say a equals to 0, not a is equal to 0, but double equal to console log. I'll say a is 0. Remove this console log. Right. I can clearly see if a is positive number, you'll print this thing. If a is not a positive number, for example, if a is something not 1024, but a is 0, then this condition will be executed. Even though the condition check will be happening here first, but you'll get the result as false because A greater than 0. 0 cannot be greater than 0. So this if statement will not be executed. It goes to else if, and we have another condition, A double equals to 0. Right? We try to do it. We try to execute it. So A double equal, sorry, 0 double equal to 0. It is true. That's why we get this as a result. If you want, I'll run the code. You'll see. You'll see the code that is present inside else if flavor braces is executed. That's why you'll see the output A is 0. And we have this outside statement. We have outside statement. If both of them things are 0, like if it is of minus 10, if A is value as minus 10, this condition will be failed, this condition will be failed, so else will be executed. Else will be executed. Note down the code. Now you'll see output that we got is condition failed. And we have the last console log. This is how this else if and the conditions will actually be appearing for us, or actually will happen. Wait a minute. Yeah. Now let's go back and let's try to understand how this entire conditional operator works. Till now we have seen if else, but there is a shorter form of using this if else statement. So for this, I'll be using this thing. Let me take the same example. I have written in a very concrete and detailed pattern altogether in this given particular example. Let me show you what does this given particular conditional operator, this question mark operator will work for. So it is kind of a nice replacement for if else statement. So I can say it like this. So let me take a different example. Let's take the same example. Let result is equal to, I'll mention this thing known as a condition, A greater than 0. A greater than 0. And I'll mention two statements. Yes, A is positive number. And I'll mention two things. Don't worry, I'll explain this syntax. It's very straightforward. Condition failed. Console.log. Or let me take a new example altogether. Let me take a new example. What is the example that we want to take? Okay. Let access allowed. I'll say let access allowed is one such thing. I'll say let age is equal to something like 12. Something like 12. If I say, if I want to write it in if else case, I'll say if age greater than 18, I'll simply mention console.log, or I'll simply say access allowed should be true. Else access allowed should be false. And I'll simply mention console.log access allowed. This is a pretty straightforward. This is a pretty straightforward code. If age is greater than 18, we have access allowed as a true. If not, it is false. So in this case, age is 12. So 12 greater than false. So this condition will fail. So this internal code, this code will not be executed. This code will be executed. This access allowed code, where access allowed value will be false. Let's run the code. You'll see the output is, sorry, wait. There is a statement. Okay, give me a minute. Yeah, now you can clearly observe that this access allowed is now storing the value of false. I think let's comment this entire code. Maybe hindering us. Now rerun the code. I'll see yes. Now the result is false. Now the result that we are seeing here is false. It is pretty straightforward. But what if we can write this entire thing in one single line? What if we can write this entire code in one single line? So let me copy this entire code. Let me copy this entire code. Conditional operator usage. Now instead of like this, I'll do one thing. I'll do one basic thing. So I don't use if this statement. But if you can clearly observe, the condition that I have used is if age greater than 18. This is the condition that I have used. I remember it. And I'll say Let me make a few modifications to our code. So I'll say let access allowed is equal to, I'll mention the condition first. I'll say age should be greater than 18, because in the above if class, this is the condition that we have mentioned. And I'll use this question mark operator. Sorry. I'll use this question mark operator and I'll mention these things. I'll say it is true or false. This is a very interesting thing. So this entire code, this entire if else code is this enough. If this condition is true, then it returns the value of true, this value, and will be stored inside this variable. If this condition false, this value will be returned and will be stored inside this variable. So the syntax, let me explain the syntax. I'll say is, we'll mention, we'll simply use some variable on the left hand side. We'll mention something known as condition. We'll use a question mark operator and we'll say value 1, sorry, value 1, value. Let's try to understand the syntax. If the respect to value 1, sorry, if the respect to condition is actually true, then whatever value that is present after the question mark will be stored inside this variable. The condition is true, whatever value that is present after the question mark, here in this case value 1, will be stored inside this respect to variable. So if condition is true, the conditional operator will return this first value and will store inside this respective variable. If the condition is false, this question mark operator will take up this value to this next left out value and will return it and eventually will be stored inside this variable. So in this case, as age value is 12, 12 greater than 18, 12 greater than 18 is a false condition. So this value will be returned by this conditional operator and will be stored it. So access allowed in this given particular case will be equal to the value of false. Will be equal to the value of false. Because the condition fails, so the second value will be returned by the question mark or conditional operator. So this would be looking like this. Now this false will be present inside this variable. False will be present inside this variable. So let me write it like this. False will be present inside this. So let me write it. Yes, you can clearly see false. Now if I make this age as something known as 19, as 19 greater than 18. So this condition is true. If condition is true, this question mark or conditional operator will return the first value. Now in that given particular case, it will be true. Let allow access is actually equal to the value of true. So this true will be written into this respective variable. Let me run the code. We'll see the value as true. This is what meant by conditional operator. Right? It is pretty straightforward. It's pretty shorthand form. So in the above example, we have seen all of these things. This entire if else statement. But we can avoid this given particular if else statement to using this thing. This example can be represented using in one single line. This is a shorthand notation. If condition is true, this question mark operator will return first value. If condition is false, this question mark operator will return second value. That's as simple as that. Now, let me write this like this. Multiple I think conditionals or multiple question mark operators. How can we use multiple question mark operators? Because if you can clearly observe in the above starting example, we have one condition, we have two conditions. A greater than 0, A double equal to the value of 0. That's what it actually meant. Now in this thing, let's do one thing. Let's try to have, how can we use this question mark operator even if we have multiple conditions altogether? That's our first thing. So I'll comment it or I'll say let message is equal to something like, if age less than 3, I'll say something like hello kid. Hello kid. This is what I'll mention. Close it. Yeah. And the second thing, always remember when you're having this column, because this is pretty straightforward. When you write a condition, you have a question mark and you have two different values. Condition, question mark, two different values. Similarly, I have written condition. If this condition is true, I want this to be returned. If this condition needs to be false, I need to go and check another condition, because if you can clearly observe, if the first condition is failing, I'll go for second condition and I'll check it. So that's why if this is going false, as we already know, if the condition is actually getting failed, the question mark operator will go for second value, value 2. Similarly, I'll mention my second condition here. I'll say age greater than 18. Greater than 18. And like this. If this condition is false, if this condition age greater than 18 is actually false, then I'll return you are or access allowed or hello young man. I'll mention it as hello young man. Even if this condition is false, I'll go ahead. I'll write it. Sorry, not like this. Sorry, I made a mistake. If this condition, I need to use question mark, not a colon. If this condition is true, I'll mention this thing, or let me write it in a single line. Yeah. If this condition is true, I'll mention this thing. If not, I'll say if age greater than 100, condition, because we follow the same syntax, condition after we should have question mark. Then I'll say hello old man. And I'll say what a unusual age. What a unusual age. This is looking pretty a long chain of things. Let me do this thing. Write it. So if this condition is true, this question mark will get the first value. If this condition is false, it goes to the second value. Always remember, I'll do this thing. If this condition is true, the question mark operator will get this thing for us. If this condition is false, then we go to the second value. So here the second value is again a condition. Here the second value is not a value, not a simple string. It is again a condition. So again we check the condition. If this condition is true, this second question mark operator will yield this or will return this given particular value. Will return this particular value. So hello young man. So this entire thing will be removed. The entire remaining code will be removed and output will be hello young man. Hello young man. If this thing is false, we go to the second thing. If this condition is false, we go to the second thing. Again, we have a condition. We'll check the condition. If this condition is true, hello old man will be given for us. If this is false, this will be the output. So this is kind of a chaining of the elements. Chaining of the elements. So if this condition is true, we'll get the result as this. If this condition is false, we'll go for another condition. And if this condition is true, this will be the result. Because this condition, this second question mark operator will return to this. So this entire thing, let me copy it. Now this entire thing will be like this. Will be like this. Right? So this is how the entire things would be formatted. This is how this entire format things would be. Similarly, if I have this age as something like 193, I'll simply say note. Okay, I haven't console log my message. Console log message. This is the first thing that I've missed. Node. You can clearly see here the age is 193. Here the age is 193. That's how it is actually working. Now let's go ahead and let's see the other parts, the other things that we actually see all together. So the non-traditional way that we're going to use specifically in this respective case would be something different. Something like sometimes you'll see people replacing if-else statement with question mark altogether, but it is completely fine. But when you're writing a complex if-else code like this, do not go with this. Do not go with this thing. Do not go with this thing. It is pretty much important that we need to remember all of these things. Right? So that's it for this respective comparisons. Now let's go ahead and understand what are these respective operators. We have this thing known as an logical operators. Let's go ahead and we'll see this what is meant by this logical operators things altogether. Yep. So let's go ahead and let's try to implement this respect to part of the logical operators. So I'm creating a new file, say uh, lo.js logical operators. I'll create this file named as logical operators. So there are specifically we have logical operators to be four, like this are or, like we have already studied about this or and not. Uh, yeah, let's do that thing. And also not. We also have this third or fourth one in the logical operator, which is known as nullish collizing, which is double question mark. This thing we'll see in the next session, but at this point of time, let's focus on these three things. So we have this thing known as an or operator, which is actually known as double dash, double type symbol, which is nothing but, let's say if I have this, let a is equal to something known as, or I'll say let instead of that console.log true or or true. Let me copy paste it to multiple times. It's a basic OR gate thing. People who have a basic thing, or let me explain it. False, false. Similarly, we have, let me explain this thing, how these thing works. Uh, it's pretty much easy to use all of these things. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. We have false. Let me write the code, then I'll explain it. Console log of console.log, not, console.log. Right. So to understand this given particular thing, OR has one simple rule. OR has one very simple rule. Uh, if either of the argument or operand is true, or returns true. So on the left hand side it is true, on the right hand side it is true. So if either of the arguments or operands for OR operator, logical operator, are true, we'll get the result as true. Right. So in this second case also, we have true and false. The output is pretty straightforward, true. In the third case also, you can clear up the false or true. Or operator will return true. So the simple thing is, if both the operands, if both are true, we'll get true. If either one is true, we'll still get the value of true. If both are false in OR, then the value would be false. Then the value would be false. Similarly, let me explain this and it is very easy. If either of argument or operand is true, then only true. Not this case. If either of the operand is false, then and returns false. And returns false. Which is nothing but, if you can clearly observe, true and true. True and true. both the arguments are true, then we got true. In the second line, we can clearly observe true and false. As we have seen, if either of the argument or operand is false, then and returns false. It is false. So here in the third line also we can clearly observe false and true. So one of the argument is false, the output is false. In the last line we have false and false. Still it is false. Still it is false. If either of the operand is false or both, let me write it to be more precise, both are false. Similarly, if either of the operand is true or both are true, then or returns true. So what does not does? It inverts the values. It inverts the values. It inverts the values. So opposite of true, false. Opposite of false, true. Right? So if you want, let me run the code. I'll say node lvo.is. Let's comment all of this unnecessary part. This is pretty straightforward to understand. But coming back to this thing, let me run the code. Yes. Opposite of true is false. That's what you got the result as false. Opposite of false is true. That's what you get the result true. Opposite of 0, true. That's why you get the result as true. Opposite of 1 or anything, it is of false. So it just inverts. It just inverts the things. If we give true as a result, it gives false. If you give false as a result, it gives as a true. This is how this entire operation of or and not will actually work. And another one thing is, I want to mention that this or finds the first truth value. Or finds first truthy value. For example, let's say if I have this thing, let me comment it. If I have a condition like this, console.log 1 or 0. Wait a minute. 1 or 0. Wait a minute. 1 or 0. As according to the statements, or finds first truthy value. So in this case, 1 is true value, 0 is false value. When you convert these things into binary, that's what, sorry, not binary, Boolean. When you try to convert these things into Boolean, if one can be converted into as represented as the value of true, 0 is represented as value of false. So in this case, whatever true value, 1, here in this case, true value is 1. This will be returned by or argument or operator altogether. So the result for this thing would be 1. Let me run the code. You can see the value is 1. So even if I say console.log, if I say null or something like 1. So in this statement, if you can clearly observe in this statement, null is not the truth value. If you convert null to Boolean, it is 0. It is false. If you convert 1 to Boolean, it is again truth value. So the output that we'll get here is 1. Here is 1. But let me take this case. We have null. We have 0. We have 1. We have 1. So in this entire scope, this is the first truth value. If you convert null to Boolean, it is 0. If you convert 0 to Boolean, it is false. So if you convert null to Boolean, it is false. If you convert 0 to Boolean, false. If you convert 1 to Boolean, it is true. So here the output is 1. Here the output is 1, even if you have undefined. When you have undefined, it is 1. But what if we have this? What if we have this? What if we have this? Let me. What if we have this? What is the truth value? So the other statement that I want to mention is or finds first truthy value and last false value. So here in this case, if you convert null to Boolean, it is a false value. If you convert undefined to Boolean, same thing, nan. If you try to convert this, it's still considered as a falsy value. If you try to convert this given particular 0 to Boolean value, it is still false. Out of all these falsy values, what is the last falsy value? Check it out. This is the first falsy value, second falsy value, last falsy value, or third falsy value, right? So or will give us the result as a 0. If I run the code, you'll see third console log output is 0 because or finds first truthy value and return it. Return it and finds last truthy value and return it. So or finds the first truthy value and it will return it. If in this sequence, if you don't find any kind of a truth value present, then what is the last falsy value will be returned by the or. Will be returned by the or. This is the standard format. This is the standard format. So this statement is, if in this statement or in this statement, you can clearly see there is one truthy value. Null is not a truthy value, but one is a truthy value. So or will return it. But if in the third statement we have entire chain, all having falsy values, so it will return last falsy value. It will return last falsy value. The same case we have this respective thing known as an a thing known as an what is this thing, and will also work in the fine. Let me write it for the and I'll say this and finds the first falsy value and return it, and it finds first or last truthy value and return it. The exact opposite of or. So the example would be this. So let me write this example, or let me use this example. I'll say console.log 1 ampersand null. The output would be null, because if you can clearly observe, and will check what is the falsy value in it and it will return. So run the code. I can clearly see the output is null. Even if it, instead of null, if I have 0, we have 0. But if we have both 0 and null, both 0 and null in this respective statement, here we have one truth value and two false values. As we have the statement and finds the first falsy value and return it. So here in this case, we have two falsy values. The first one is 0 and the second one is null. So in this case, the output would be 0, because and will focus on getting first falsy value. Whatever first falsy value, it will return it. And it finds last truthy value. So I'll say console.log. I'll simply mention it as 1 and 23 and I'll say hi. Now in this case, as in the statement it is mentioned, and finds first falsy value and return it, and it finds last truthy value and return it. Last truthy value and return it. If you can clearly observe, in this entire statement, we all have truthy values. One is a truth value, 23 is a truth value, hi is a truth value. If you convert it, if you do this operation, the last truthy value in this entire chain is hi. Last truthy value chain is hi. So the output would be hi. I can clearly see hi. Let me comment it down. So this is how this both the respective and or things will be actually working at all. Will be working for us, right? So that's it for this respective session. So yeah, we'll meet in the next session altogether. Thank you all.